Welcome to the Alpha House. Today, the 29th day of May, as we watch South Africans participate in elections, we invite your comments on what we are engaging in. We are making a contribution to the continent of Africa, and your comments are critical today, tomorrow, and the day after.
This is the journey to One Africa.
Almost 30 years ago to the date, our brothers and sisters in South Africa will cast their vote today, the 29th day of May, the year 2024. It is a momentous occasion because we know that once again, the South Africans have an opportunity to express their views through the ballot to determine which political party will govern South Africa. It is a unique voting system that is not common in many African countries. Not common because primacy is given to the political party, so that the voter votes for the African National Congress or for EFF or for Mkhonto Wesizwe, the new kid in the block, or for DA or other political parties. What is significant is that the party that gains the majority of the votes then deploys those who will be the members of parliament and those who will serve in other capacities, and also deploys the persons who will serve as the president and the deputy president. The model has its advantages in that it gives strength to the political party. And one hopes that this time round, the South Africans will express their views in a manner that is beneficial to the people of South Africa. We all know that South Africa is still reeling from the effects of apartheid. There are quite a number of issues that remain outstanding. We may have regained independence, political independence, but there is a sense in which there are those who are dissatisfied with the land question, which, as some once said, and I agree with them, is the last colonial question. It is the truth that that particular issue has not been resolved and that too much land still remains in the hands of the whites. And it is the view of many, including myself, that until and unless the question of land is resolved, the ghosts of apartheid will continue to dance their macabre dance, and the issues in South Africa will not be settled. It is understandable, therefore, that EFF, particularly as a political party, has been in the forefront of advocating for the resolution of the land question. The other issue that I believe will be on the table is the economic situation. Many people still feel left out, that they are not enjoying the dividends that they were promised when in 1984 apartheid was destroyed, at least in its much more visible forms. And one hopes that that is something that is going to be on the table when the voters are casting their votes today on the 29th day of May. Of course, there are other issues outside of the domestic arena. It cannot be denied that South Africa remains the largest economy in the SADC region and indeed within the continent of Africa. And many do hope that South Africa will play a leading role in the African context. And there are many things to look at. How are we going to use the strength of South Africa in different sectors of African economy to help liberate African economies? How are they going to use their natural resources? How are they going to use those resources for the benefit of the countries in SADC? How are they going to ensure that they use their diplomatic position to push things that will help liberate the continent of Africa, which, despite the fact that we claim we enjoy political independence, in many ways are still shackled down by things that arrest political development and therefore interfere with social cohesion. Another issue that I think is going to be very important in this regard is going forward, how is Africa going to benefit from a renewed South Africa? We know that South Africa is the major representative of the African continent in the emerging equation within the BRICS. Is their involvement going to ensure that Africa begins to liberate ourselves from the shackles of Western economies? Is it going to ensure that South Africa plays a leading role rather than playing the role of the gooseberry for China and India and Brazil? Is it going to be the reality that whichever political party and the president that emerges from that election is going to be a champion for Pan-Africanism? And when we talk about Pan-Africanism, we are talking about a continent that is going to give practical meaning not only to the moral and sentimental and character that was infused into Pan-Africanism in 1960s, but is going to give practical meaning to Pan-Africanism as understood by younger Africans. Younger Africans are now saying, when we talk about Pan-Africanism, we don't just want to romanticize about it. We don't want to philosophize about it. We want a Pan-Africanism that is going to address the totality of our lives. And what is the totality of our lives? That when we talk politics, it's politics that is going to deliver in the economic arena. It is politics that is going to deliver in the industrial sectors of our economy. It is politics that is going to impact positively in agriculture. It is politics that is going to impact positively in the area of education. It is politics that is going to ensure that we enjoy the dividends of the fourth industrial revolution when we are thinking about artificial intelligence, so that Pan-Africanism is going to deal with those things. Pan-Africanism is going to ensure that we liberate ourselves from the shackles of other people's currencies. What are we going to ensure? What is going to ensure that we have a common currency that eases trade within the continent of Africa? What are we going to do to ensure that there is free movement of people within the continent of Africa to give practical meaning to Africa Continental Free Trade Area? And I say that the South African elections are critical in this regard, because when one looks at the manifestos of the key players, some of them are quite visible in the manner that they talk about Pan-Africanism and in the manner that they are talking about changing Africa and changing the continent in a fundamental way so that the continent can play a critical role going forward. So the elections that are being held in South Africa today for the South Africans has domestic significance, as it should, so that the man and woman in Gauteng would want to know how their housing is going to be taken care of. They would want to know how their health care is going to be taken care of, how their education is going to be taken care of, how their public transportation is going to be taken care of, how their social welfare is going to be taken care of. But those who are observing from outside of the continent of Africa at three levels. Level number one, those within the SADC region who believe that South Africa is an anchor economy. They want to know whether they are going to be allowed to participate in the activities in Africa, so that if you are from Malawi, you are from Lesotho, you are from Mozambique, are you going to be allowed to work in South Africa without the difficulties that sometimes emerge from time to time? Those from within the continent of Africa are also looking at South Africa as a place where there are economic dividends. Remember that there are quite a number of South African companies operating within the continent. If you look at the area of mobile telephony, MTN is present in very many areas. If you look at the banking sector, you have banks such as STANBIC, and those within the continent are going to look at that. Those in the diaspora are also going to look at South African elections. Are we going to be allowed to participate in that economy in the different sectors? And there are sectors which are much more prominent, such as mining. I've already talked about agriculture. So these are important elections. It is only 30 years since the ghost of apartheid was exorcised, but we know that that ghost still dances around, wanting to rear its ugly head. So this is a day when we who are observing from outside wish our South African brethren a good day, and we are not the ones to judge who they are going to elect, but we believe that they are going to put into consideration all these fundamentals to address the domestic, to address the regional, to address the African and the diaspora, and that ultimately a South Africa emerges that in truth is independent. I always remember fondly the words of a famous African who once said that it is possible to gain political freedom without being free. I hope that when South Africans are casting their vote, they are thinking of ensuring that gaining political freedom with structures of independence, that is having a national anthem, having blacks as heads of institutions, is not sufficient. It is important that all sectors of the economy are properly liberated, and that there is a presence of South Africans in the critical levers of the economy, critical levers of politics, so that when we talk about South Africa, we are talking about a country that is strong in fact and whose activities impact positively on her population and the entire continent and ultimately the world. We wish the people of South Africa a peaceful election date in the hope that they will conduct themselves as they have previously, diligently and effectively, and of course in a manner that will underpin the tenets of democracy which many died for, many were maimed for, and many live for going forward. Amandla. Historically, of course, when we look at South Africa, we know that the African National Congress is a political party with a long history. Founded in 1912, is the oldest political party in Africa. And the African National Congress has a long history of the struggle. We'll remember the early days of the founders such as Pixley Kaisa Kaseme. We'll remember the stalwarts such as Albert Luthuli. We'll remember Nelson Mandela. We'll remember Walter Sisulu. We'll remember Govan Mbeki. And these were the pioneers. And of course, I can't forget the ladies who are present, such as Winnie Madikizela Mandela and Albertina Sisulu. And African National Congress, through its political wing, and of course, through the struggle, people like the Umkhonto weSizwe, which operated in exile for a long time and ultimately contributed to the liberation of Africa. This makes South Africa's anchorage to African National Congress to be one that is historically significant. I remember as a young lad when the African National Congress was in exile during the activities and the days of Oliver Tambo, when he was in exile. And that in itself makes ANC a strong political party with strong historical claims. But since 1984, we have seen that ANC has suffered. It has suffered in a number of ways because there were those who believed that it was departing from the original path. And that is how we can understand the departure of some of the stalwarts of the African National Congress, such as from the youth wing, we know Julius Selo Malema, who left the party and formed the EFF, and that has weakened the party. You cannot downplay the fact that when EFF left and has gained some traction, and I believe that is one of the parties to watch during this election. It may very well emerge as one of the stronger parties during this election, and that in itself is a blow for the African National Congress. In the recent past, we have seen the registration of Mkhonto we Sizwe, which was actually the name of the armed wing of the African National Congress. We have seen the challenges of the use against the use of that name in the South African courts, and it was championed, as we know, by Jacob Zuma, who is a former president, who we now know has been barred from participating in the election. But that notwithstanding, Mkhonto we Sizwe is also going to play a very critical role and has its support base, its age in the political arena notwithstanding. The Democratic Alliance is also, of course, yet another party that has remained very white and has controlled quite a number of areas, particularly in the Western Cape. We also know COP was another party. So when one is talking about political parties, not in any order, but one cannot deny the fact that the African National Congress is still going to emerge as the strongest of those parties. But I believe that in terms of the votes that it will receive, they'll be reduced drastically, and that some of the constituencies will be taken by EFF, which has strong support base amongst the younger people, and of course the sentimental inclination to Jacob Zuma is also going to play a part. So Mkhonto we Sizwe may also take some votes from ANC. But I hold the view that South Africans are faced with a very difficult situation, particularly in making decisions without looking at merely the historical roles played by political parties, but looking to the present and the future.